What I'm about to tell you honestly sounds unbelievable, but it's coming straight from court testimony. Josh Duggar is currently sitting in the special housing unit while actively trying to get his conviction thrown out. Yeah, let that sink in for a second. Because I got access to the hearing transcript from last week, and when federal attorneys started questioning him about how his motion was written and mailed, things got really messy really fast. They pushed him to explain exactly how everything came together, who prepared it, how it got filed, and he kept dodging, not directly answering, just circling around the truth. At one point, they even tried to pin down whether he was in solitary back in June of 2025. And if you remember, that lines up with when he got in trouble for having a contraband phone. Again.
This isn't new behavior. If that's what landed him there this time, it would be the third time. And here's the wild part. While all of this is happening, while he's in the shoe, he's asking a court to vacate his sentence. It almost sounds unreal. But the deeper you go into the transcript, the more it raises questions, especially about who's actually behind the legal filings. Because even though he tried very hard not to involve his wife, Anna, the government clearly suspects otherwise. Their position is that she may have been the one who prepared the documents, physically delivered them to the court clerk, and then mailed copies back to him, creating delays that made the filing late. And not just late, possibly manipulated. There are even implications during questioning that some of the documents themselves may not be entirely legitimate. The judge didn't seem convinced by Josh's answers either. He was caught contradicting himself more than once, answering the same question differently depending on how it was asked. And that's a big problem in court. At one point, though, he does acknowledge something important, that his wife was essentially responsible for writing everything, which completely shifts the narrative he's been trying to build. Because according to him, he wasn't just a defendant, he was acting like some kind of investigator. He claims he had been building a civil case for years, collecting records, communications, even alleged evidence tied to officials who released information about him in the past. But when you actually look at the history of that case, it doesn't line up the way he's presenting it.
The lawsuit he references had already been dismissed, and not because it needed more development, but because there wasn't a legal basis to continue. The courts made it clear that the records in question didn't violate the protections he claimed. So now, hearing him describe himself as someone compiling evidence, tracking sources, gathering files, it raises a different kind of question. What exactly was he doing with all of that information? Because he mentions things like audio files, photographs, communications with sources. And naturally, that makes you wonder, what kind of activity was actually happening behind the scenes? Even if he frames it as research or investigation, it starts to sound like something else entirely when you put it into context. Especially when he argues that the government taking his devices interfered with this work. From his perspective, losing access to those devices didn't just affect his defense, it supposedly disrupted a broader effort to expose wrongdoing. But again, that's his claim, and the court doesn't seem to be fully buying it. What stands out the most is the pattern. There's a consistent attempt to shift responsibility, to redirect attention, to suggest that other people or other circumstances played a bigger role than they actually did.
And when that doesn't work, the focus turns outward, toward questioning the motives of anyone who reported concerns or brought information forward. At the same time, there are deeper issues surrounding how situations like this are handled more broadly, especially when it comes to records, accountability, and transparency. Because in some cases, systems designed to protect privacy can also end up limiting access to important information. And that creates tension between protecting individuals and ensuring that the public understands what's really happening. Then there's another layer to all of this: the people connected to the situation. The relationships, the decisions about who is brought into certain environments, who is trusted, who is given access. Those choices matter,
because over time they can create complicated dynamics where responsibility becomes harder to untangle and accountability becomes easier to deflect. And when you step back and look at the bigger picture, you start to see how all of these pieces fit together. Legal strategies, personal connections, public narratives, each one influencing the other. And right now, everything is unfolding at the same time. A motion to overturn a conviction, questions about how that motion was created, contradictions in testimony, and a judge who doesn't seem fully convinced. So the real question becomes, where does this go from here? Because depending on how the court views these inconsistencies, it could have serious consequences. Not just for the case itself, but for anyone connected to how these filings were handled.
At the end of the day, situations like this remind you how important clarity and truth are, especially when everything is being examined under a microscope. But I want to know what you think. Do you believe his version of events? Or does something about this not sit right with you? Let me know your thoughts down below. And if you want more breakdowns like this, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what comes next.